In this video, I'm going to be telling you not only how and why I made this, but why I think it's something that you are probably fully capable of making for yourself.
Cool.
So about a month ago, I fell down kind of a strange rabbit hole.
I was, as always, just randomly browsing through YouTube when I was recommended out of nowhere a series of videos from a channel called Digging the Greats. This video series was logging the results of an experiment he was running in which he opted to use a traditional Apple iPod for 30 days in lieu of modern music apps like Spotify and Tidal.
Now, I actually grew up during the era of the iPod. I saw the evolution of the devices firsthand, from their first generation models all the way to the iPod Touches, which were basically just iPhones without the cell phone service, which for its time was revolutionary. I actually had a 6th generation iPod Classic back in the day that I mostly used to watch episodes of Family Guy that I had bought from the iTunes store to see if the swears were uncensored. So honestly, the entire experiment had this nostalgic appeal for me.
And while, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not really sure what, if anything, I was expecting to take away from these videos, I can tell you that what I did take away was something I certainly wasn't expecting to. It was a concept that was entirely new to me at the time. Digital minimalism. Now, hold on, because if you're anything like me, I am sure that a lot of you just rolled your eyes at those words, but trust me when I say that I am neither some hippy-dippy cottagecore space case, nor some phone bad boomer. Just let me plead my case for a minute. I have ADHD, and frankly, it can be a nightmare to live with and try to manage. Generally, I can't stand to be without some form of stimulation at any given moment, and as such, over the years, I have become a habitual passive content consumer. While TikTok is yet to get its teeth into me, generally, if I don't have something that I'm actively engaging with at any given moment, I tend to instinctively reach for my phone and either start browsing Blue Sky or Reddit.
And this is where the concept of digital minimalism comes in. As it was explained to me, it's not the idea of necessarily getting rid of all of your electronic devices, but simply choosing how and when you are going to intentionally engage with technology so that you don't get lost in the trap of passive consumption.
In the case of the Great iPod Experiment, this meant no longer just hopping onto Spotify and either hitting your likes or your Discover Weekly playlist, and instead saying, I want to listen to music. And now I will actively select an album I would like to listen to and give it the respect it deserves. Now, I am extremely guilty of being that guy who hears one song that he likes from a band, throws it onto his liked songs playlist on Spotify, and then just pretty much only ever listens to that playlist. And it makes me think a lot about something that Brian Altano, formerly from The Comedy Button and currently from This Thing Rules, said, where he talked about the idea of fighting to death for the concept of the album, where instead of just picking and choosing the songs that you like, having an appreciation for essentially a curated experience from beginning to end that an artist put together thoughtfully as a complete experience. And frankly, while I'm not always the best at living that advice, I do have a great appreciation for what Brian is talking about. I think if anybody has ever listened to and really appreciated a concept album, then they understand what he means by having respect for the art form and what it's capable of being. And in addition to trying to cultivate that healthier relationship with music, the intentionality of switching over to a dedicated music device with no internet connection holds a secondary appeal for me in that, frankly, I'm pretty bad at discovering music. I make no exaggeration when I say that I tend to only really listen to a new artist or album maybe once or twice a year. Generally, my executive dysfunction holds me back from seeking new music, and I fall into comfortable ruts.
And this is where the iPod comes in. Because when making the decision to adopt the iPod as an intentional primary music listening device, I also made the decision that I would only be putting music onto it that I had physically ripped from CDs that I could put into my computer CD drive.
Now, of course, this may sound counterintuitive at first, but here's the rub. By putting myself in this position, I am forcing myself to have to think about what new albums I want to buy when I want to add music to my device. I can't just look up an artist on Spotify and hit play at a whim, and instead it's going to force myself to grow my own music collection organically. Honestly, I haven't bought a CD in years. When I got my 2019 Chevy Cruze a few years back, I realized a little too late that it did not have a CD drive. I haven't owned a dedicated CD player since high school, and as a result, I just no longer had any reason to buy CDs, so I stopped.
But that all changes now. So, with my resolve steeled, the only step left was to find my old iPod and crack her open. And that's where the next wrinkle came into play, because I have no idea where that damn thing is.
I turned my apartment inside out and made an unholy mess of our storage unit, but to no avail. I turned up seemingly every single piece of technology that my wife and I had ever owned except that damn iPod. Thankfully, though, I wasn't out of luck just yet. You see, I went looking for it the same week that I was leaving town to go visit my parents, and I know that my father had owned a number of iPods as they had come out. So, I figured why not, let's throw a Hail Mary. When we arrived that day, I asked my parents if they did still have any of the old iPods just sitting around, and after a little bit of rifling through junk drawers, my mother managed to find a long-dead 5th generation black iPod that they were more than happy to get rid of. That meant it was now time to tackle the second major wrinkle in our plan. As while the iPod is still a perfectly serviceable device, there is one major problem that needed to be addressed. You see, old lithium-ion batteries have this nasty habit of turning into spicy pillows when you charge them for the first time in years. Don't ask me how I know this, and something would need to be done to keep our apartment from burning down.
But you see, I'm not really much of a handy person. The most technologically advanced modding I've ever done was replacing the battery on this old 3DS and installing custom firmware that I can't really show you because I don't want Nintendo to nuke my channel from orbit. But something in my brain told me that I was up to the challenge. And you know what? If we're gonna go through all the effort of putting a new battery in, why not go the whole 9 yards? Let's upgrade the battery, upgrade the storage capacity, and give the old girl a facelift while we're at it.
So a little over $100 later, I was armed with a 2000 milliamp hour battery, an iFlash quad expandable flash storage drive, and a fancy new purple shell. I opted to keep the original black scroll wheel as I felt it would look nice against the purple faceplate, and my wife agreed. Now, the fun part. I actually recorded the entirety of this process, and now I'm going to show you a sort of cut down version to let you get a glimpse of the reality of what it's like, because I'm not going to lie to you. I think you can do this. And I think not only can you do this, you should do this, especially if you aren't sure that you can. Okay, so this is the device that is being offered up for a little grand experiment. This is my father's old 5th generation iPod, which up until now has just been sitting in a bag full of other electronics. So we are going to perform surgery on this thing and try to bring it back to life more powerful than ever before. So, from everything I've heard from the various videos I've been watching about upgrading and repairing iPods, this first part is supposedly the most difficult. So in theory, after we do this, it'll be easy street.
Oh wait, you're serious? Let me laugh even harder.
How hard could it be, right? DankPods recommends wearing gloves when doing this because this thing is basically a knife, so I'm taking his advice. Alright, I am making the first incision. Supposedly, you just have to get in there with your spudger and separate these little clips that are holding it together. And because we are going to do a full case replacement on this thing, I'm not too worried about damaging the housing of the device. So hopefully, as long as we don't mess up any of the internals, we should be fine. And I think, yes, we are already in. Beautiful. Okay, so we do have to be somewhat careful because we do have these little ribbon cables right here. Oh no, we broke a clip. Or so I thought, but actually, as it turns out, we would learn later on that the piece was not something that had broken off of the device and was instead something that was just sort of loose in there. And though it would become a major thorn in my side throughout this process, the good news is it was completely fine by the end of it. Nothing was irreparably broken, and we eventually got it back into its proper place. Alright, this next step is where I either prove that I am a genius or a complete idiot. So, I have angled tweezers, and I need to lift up this little connector right here in order to free the battery connection, because if I try and fully separate the case right now, we're gonna rip a connector out. But I have to be very careful, because if I do this wrong, then I've worked the whole thing up. So, let's get in there. Thankfully, we did have a pair of angled tweezers, because we are a house of nerds and we build model kits. And I am sure all of the tech heads watching this are cringing, but I am here to tell you that... Aha! And I was about to say that I don't know what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing now. Hold still for a moment while I consult the videos once again to figure out what I'm doing. Okay, so now that we got that, here's the hard drive. We're gonna need to disconnect that. But it seems like I'm going to need to use my fingernail for this one. So, we're gonna get naked. Let's flip this thing over. Because the problem is there's this little black switch right there that we need to just flip upwards. There we are. Okay, so now it should just disconnect. There we are. Look at that. I'm a genius. We don't need this anymore, because what we are going to do is we are going to install this iFlash Quad, which will allow me to use 4 micro SD cards to really kick up the storage space on this baby. And we are going to be using 3 64 gig cards today. We're going to leave 1 slot empty. Because when I looked on Amazon for compatible micro SD cards, I could only find them in packs of 1, 2, 3, and 5. So for now, we are just going to put 3 of the 64 gigs in there. I think that's going to be more than enough music for a long time. And if we need to upgrade the storage later, then we can burn that bridge when we come to it. And then the last thing we are going to need to do to get these two halves completely separated is to get rid of that last connector that goes to the headphone cable. And just like before, we're just going to lift up that bail, and that should just come free. And with that, both halves are completely separated, including this dead jank-ass battery. And, as I said, we are going to be putting a new beautiful wine purple backplate on this one, so we don't care about this. Also, I'm sure it was driving some of you insane, but I did eventually realize that that little plastic piece that broke off was important, so it is now back in its proper place. Alright, now, since we are going to be doing a full case replacement with the front and the back on this iPod, the next thing we're going to need to do is remove these screws that are on the side so that we can detach the front plate from this metal. So luckily, I still have this teeny tiny little screwdriver that I got from a battery replacement kit for my 3DS. So I am going to go in here now and disconnect these screws. So that is all of the screws removed. So the next thing we're going to need to do is very carefully disconnect the screen from the housing. And we are going to have to once again flip up this teeny tiny little bail. And this is, as I've come to understand it, very difficult. And yeah, no, it really is. So I think what I'm going to do is go in there and try to use my nail. Because I have at least somewhat long nails, and it might be the best tool to hand. There we go! That bail is flipped, so we should be able to just disconnect that ribbon cable now. Let me get gloved back up. So now we just need to very carefully disconnect that ribbon cable now that it's no longer being held in place. And this glove did not go on perfectly, but it's fine! We got it disconnected. Okay, so now we should just be able to get these clips on the side disconnected, and everything should just start to come apart. Trying to be very careful here, but I am not the most well-coordinated person in the world, but there we go. The screen has come off. And there is the former front panel of our iPod. there is the click wheel and the center button. And there's those two little pieces, the one that came off earlier. So we won't be replacing the click wheel today, but I will be putting a new center button in, which the center button isn't really connected at all. So we can just, boop, that's gone. Okay, and now I'm wondering if I did an unnecessary step because the video I was following along was replacing the click wheel, but we are going to go ahead and get that screen reattached now. Okay, just gotta carefully feed that cable back in. I am a fool, but you know what? It is my first day, and I think we got it, so we'll just pull that bail back down, and that should be in place now. There we go, that is perfect. Okay, so fun fact, I had to step away for a moment because I wanted to find our screen cleaner wipes to give our bare screen a nice little rub down before we installed it into the new case. And also because this little new center wheel that we got had some like gunk on it from like a sticker or something. I'm not sure what the deal was with that, so we also wiped that down with some alcohol. So, stopping there. Let us install the new center button. Okay, so we are going to carefully flip over this click wheel. We don't want to hurt the ribbon cable. And we just need to install this center button, which as you can see is not really, it's not a mechanical piece. It just sort of fits right in there and it clicks down on that button. And that is a thing of beauty. That's not going to sit perfectly still for right now, but that is fine. Okay, so next step is going to be either the most satisfying or the most frustrating step, depending on what I've seen. And that is we are going to put our new front panel on. So I am going to, as is per tradition, leave this front plastic there for now, but we do need to take off this screen protector. I don't see a really obvious place to grab it from, but let me see. All right, we have technology. Just grab that. And do I leave any of this? No, I think I do just... Oh god, the static cling! That's the worst thing for this job! Okay, I believe I need to take all of this off. Okay, no, I'm an idiot. I actually just need to get this little piece that's cut out in the center, which is going to prove to be an interesting task. Oh, okay, there we go. And I do think I probably streaked the internals when I did that, but I don't think I actually broke anything at least. So that sucked a fat one. That really did. And I think what I'm going to try to do is... Should I? Because I think that is... Hold on, we're going to do a little test feel here and see... Okay, no, I think we're good. I think the problem is on the plastic. I think we're good. So, now we are going to just try to get that aligned. There's a little stray plastic right there that's going to be a problem. And I'll put a link in the comments. Oh, that is ugly. That is really ugly. Okay, hold on. I did manage to get some gunk right up in them guts. And that is definitely going to show through if I don't do anything about it right now. There we go. Okay, we're good. But yes, all of the parts for this came from Elite Obsolete Electronics. That operation over there is apparently the thing that is just keeping the iPod modding scene alive with their aftermarket parts. And look at that. That is beautiful. That purple with the black center, or purple with the black scroll wheel and then the center. Obviously, the scroll wheel's seen better days, but I think it's fine. And like, you're not going to notice it unless you're like really taking a close look. And I think it wasn't worth buying another black scroll wheel. Like that's gorgeous to me. I don't care. So the next thing we need to do is we need to take these tiny little screws right here and put them back in place, which the video guide I'm watching makes it seem like that might be a little difficult.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Okay, next step. All right, and now we come to the real heart of this operation. This is the iFlash Quad. That is what is going to be replacing our hard drive, and that is going to give us so much more space. Now, what I have seen recommended is to get these formatted in advance because we are going to be installing custom firmware on this iPod. So I have already gotten these formatted. I believe it was exFAT. I'm not 100% because I did this earlier this week when I had time. But boom, those are in there now. And now comes a very crucial decision. Because I've been watching a lot of DankPods in preparation for this, and what he recommends is putting a little piece of blue tack to hold these in place. That way, when your iPod gets like jostled around or anything like that, they're not going to be like coming loose. That is a risk you run for something that you're going to be taking on the road with you everywhere. I didn't really love the idea of putting blue tack on this because I feel like you run the risk of that going everywhere. But the more I think about it, I do think I am going to have to defer to wisdom on this. All right, we have acquired our blue tack. So let me just get some of this set up. Blue tack has been installed, as have all of these micro SDs, and hopefully I did not just bork the entire operation and make it so that there's going to be blue tack all over the inside of this iPod down the line. But I mean, hey, hopefully this is like a permanent solution and this thing's going to be wonderful forever. And then maybe I'll win the lottery too. Okay, so this next step is going to be a lot like just doing the reverse of what we did when we disconnected the hard drive earlier. So we have another one of those bails, and we are going to carefully latch that bail upwards. And we are going to get that ribbon cable in there, hopefully. I think we got it. We'll put that bail back down to... Oh, no, we fucked it. Hopefully we didn't completely fuck it, but the ribbon cable was not inserted, so we're going to try that again. And a crucial part of all of this is obviously that I don't know for sure, I don't have the experience to know for sure how much pressure is needed in any given situation. I put that bail down, but I don't think that's fully connected on all sides. And this is a pretty important step, so I want to make sure that everything is as good as it can possibly be. And make sure that's all the way in there. And hopefully that should be okay. Now that is... I think that's fine. I think I was just looking at it from a bad angle. Now, it really does look like, and this is the part where I screw myself because of my perfectionism, but I really feel like this side is not as in and as connected as it could be. I think that is good. So we put that bail back down. And now comes the step that DankPods suggested, which was to put this gaffer tape right there so that the iFlash Quad is not just rubbing directly on all the electronics. Okay, so between cuts, I did a little research, and I think the video guide I've been following did things in a little bit of a weird order. So what we're going to do is we're gonna peel back that iFlash for a second because we want to get the headphone jack reconnected. I don't feel much movement. That's a good sign. Okay, the next step we're going to do is to put this big Chungus battery in here. This is a 2000 milliamp battery compared to I do not see milliamp hours on this one, but I mean, just look at that. That is bigger, and that is going to mean we can listen to our music for longer. So as you can see, I put some double-sided tape in here because the batteries in these are put in place with adhesive. We don't want them to move. And this gaffer tape was the best option I had to hand. And hopefully that'll work just fine. So we're going to place that battery down very carefully and hope that that tape is enough to make her stick. And now we have to connect the battery to the iPod like it was connected before. Okay, so I think we got this. We are going to, once again, just very carefully lift up that little brown piece whose name I have forgotten. Alright, we got that lifted up. And now we gotta connect the battery. So we will just feed that through. Is that not where you feed through? I'm pretty sure that's where you feed through. Yes. Feast, my child. Push that down. And hopefully, that's connected. Okay, it's been a long time since I've used an iPod, so actually what we're going to try and do is see if that doesn't wake it up. Oh, look at that! Let there be light! It's alive! It's alive! Okay, great. Fantastic. That is exactly what we want to be seeing here. Let's try that again. Make sure I didn't knock anything loose. That is beautiful. She lives. That means we can move on to the next step. So next step, we got to get this baby hooked up to a computer. I have a new third-party 30-pin connector that I bought off of Amazon, because one of the most important things I learned when doing my research is that you should make sure to hook it up to the computer and test everything before we fully end up assembling everything. That way, if there's any adjustments that need to be made, we can do so. Come on. Go all the way in there. Oh, look at that. Look at that. She's charging. There we go. Okay. Software required for communicating with iPods is not installed. Would you like to download and install it now? Yes, we would. Installing iPod support. Yes. So the computer screen said the restore is complete. There we go. Your iPod has been restored to factory settings and is restarting. Please leave your iPod connected. It will appear in the iTunes window after it restarts. And look at that. We got a little progress bar down there. Can you see the progress bar? Yes, you can. Okay. If I'm going to be using this new iPod for lossless FLAC files, we're going to need some music, right? So I want the very first album I put on this thing to be possibly my favorite album of all time. What is that, you may ask? Well, if you know that I am basic, then you'd probably guess it is The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. So, while this is getting set up, I am going to take this CD over to my own computer and pop it into the disk drive and use FreeAC to rip the FLAC files from it so we can transplant it onto the iPod. Okay, I have finished ripping the CD and now we have hopefully loaded Rockbox onto our iPod. So, let's eject it. And we are going on to that. Look at that, she lives! Beautiful. iPod 174 gigabytes free. It's a thing of beauty. How do I put you to sleep? It has been way too long since I've used an iPod. I guess we'll just lock you for now. And now that you're locked, let's go ahead and make sure we've got everything set up properly before we fully close you. Okay, so we are going to slip that gaffer tape back in order to hopefully minimize any damage that might occur as a result of the iFlash sliding around. We are going to reinstall these little gray pieces that were giving me such a nightmare, and still are because I'm not doing this correctly. Okay, iFlash is seated properly. You might have just heard my wife in the other room. That is okay though. That is perfectly okay because we are almost done here, and I was a dummy who didn't remember to close the door before I started recording. I don't know that these are in the right spots. They're probably not. Honestly, the biggest thorn in my side throughout this entire process has been these little gray pieces. That's what I have learned today, is that these pieces are a nightmare to work with, and they will be your biggest enemy if you're going to be modding an iPod. But we are basically done at this point, so we just have to fit her together. And this, I really hope I'm doing this correctly, because it is like... Oh, okay, we're almost there. And I think that does it. Okay, she is flush. We are going to start by peeling that off. And then we are going to finish peeling this back that has already started coming off, and you ignore that. That is from my hands throughout this entire process, but look at that. That is our Pointless Pod, as she will be known. And with that, the Pointless Pod was finished and ready for action. 174 gigabytes of storage with one slot left for expansion, a new purple glow, and a bigger battery than I will realistically ever need. But with that much storage, the next step was obvious. We gotta fill that sucker up. This is my CD collection, started in high school and mostly finished by college. It's not that big, because as I said before, I've never really been much of a music person, I guess, but frankly it's kind of a blessing because it meant a lot less time ripping CDs. You see, if I'm going to put this much storage on the Pointless Pod, I'm gonna make the most of it, damn it! Taking yet another cue from digging the grates, I installed the third-party OS Rockbox onto the new pod.
So other than the general fact that custom firmware is always awesome, why would I go through the effort of installing Rockbox on this 5th generation iPod? Because there's one very important thing that you can do through Rockbox that you can't do through iOS, and that is playing FLAC files. So if you're anything like myself, you've probably never really paid much attention to the different audio formats and are mostly just used to downloading MP3s. The short version is that FLAC is what is referred to as a lossless format. Have you ever put a CD in a CD player and noticed that there seemed to be this sort of ineffable quality difference between listening to an MP3 and listening to the CD that you can't really put your finger on?
Well, as it turns out, that difference isn't just in your head. MP3 is what is called a lossy format that compresses the quality slightly in order to take up less storage space. For most purposes, it doesn't really tend to make a big difference, but the name of the game here is intentionality, and to that end, why would we not intentionally go with the best instead of just good enough? That's where this program comes in. FreeAC. It is a free version of another program called Exact Audio Copy, or EAC. Through FreeAC, I was able to rip my CDs as FLACs instead of MP3s. This means that they'll take up more storage, but this is a collection that I am going to be slowly building over time anyways, and I've got the space to spare.
The other trade-off, though, is that ripping FLAC files can be a very time-consuming and exhausting process, and it's actually something that I staggered out over several days in order to keep myself sane.
During this time, I also made use of the music player Strawberry, as its cover manager allowed me to easily add covers to my albums before placing them on the iPod. That said, though, there are a couple more bits of advice I want to give to anybody else who is attempting this process themselves. First, although Rockbox does allow you to drag and drop files from your computer directly onto your iPod without needing to go through iTunes, if you do so while the iPod is in Rockbox mode, the files will corrupt during the transfer. That's bad. However, the solution to this problem is extremely simple. Before hooking your iPod up to the computer to transfer your files, hold the menu and center buttons until the device reboots, and then the moment you see the Apple logo, lock the device. Doing so will ensure that the device boots in iOS instead of Rockbox. You can still drag and drop the files now without using iTunes, but they'll actually transfer properly. Once you're finished transferring files, simply reboot the device again in the exact same way, but don't lock it this time, and it will boot into Rockbox just like before. Second piece of advice. When exporting covers from Strawberry, I have been having to take the extra step of opening those exported covers in MS Paint and then saving them again in order to have them show up on the device. The short version is basically that the files spat out by Strawberry are just a little too fancy for our old-ass iPod to read, so I had to dumb them down a bit.
So with all that said, what are my final thoughts? Well, we're only a couple of weeks into this, so it's really kind of still early to be making judgment calls, but I have noticed that when listening to music off of the iPod, it feels like there's more of a sense of ownership, like I'm listening to my songs instead of just streaming music, if that makes sense. I guess it's a hard thing to quantify, but vibes count for a lot, and I can tell you that since making the switch to using an iPod more often, the vibes have been immaculate. I found myself engaging more with music, not only as a leisure time activity, but as an artistic medium. I found myself making lists of albums that I want to own physically. I've been talking to friends in order to get recommendations for expanding my library, and I've been visiting CD stores for the first time in years. I don't know if I would say anything as histrionic as it's changed my life in the 3 weeks I've had it, but it makes me happy, and I think that's important. It makes me happy that I have this more intentional way to engage with my music now. It makes me happy that I managed to commit to and complete a project that forced me to develop new skills. And it makes me happy that you've watched this far.
So if you enjoyed this, I wholeheartedly recommend that you consider modding an iPod of your very own, especially if you've never done any sort of hardware mod before. It will make you feel so cool to have this finished product, and there is still a really healthy market for secondary parts. All of the ones for this mod came from Elite Obsolete Electronics, not sponsored, and there is a large number of easy-to-follow guides all over the internet. Trust me, if I can do this, you can.
But in the meantime, that's really about all I have to say, other than thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, why not share it with a friend of yours who you think might be interested in doing a project like this for themselves? And hey, while I still have you here, how about checking out another one of my videos? I recommend the one I made about why the new generation of Beyblade is a surprisingly enjoyable and engaging hobby, even for adults like yourself and myself. But in the meantime, just remember that this has been a powerfully pointless video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways. Thanks for watching, and think different.